My name is Gregory Doyle and I'm 46 years old. 3 months ago, I sat in a probate courtroom in the county seat, in a hard wooden chair next to my sister Carol, and I watched a bailiff wheel a small television to the front of the room and press play on a recording my mother had made 8 months before she died. And I watched my sister's face, which had been so confident, so composed, so certain of everything she had built, come apart 1 second at a time, as our mother's voice filled that courtroom from beyond the grave and said the words Carol had spent a year praying no one would ever hear. Carol had walked into that courtroom holding a will that gave her everything. She walked out holding nothing, and the whole reason, was that our mother had known her own daughter better than her daughter ever imagined. For the last 3 years of our mother's life, I bathed her, fed her, drove her to every appointment, and slept in a chair beside her bed on her worst nights, while my sister Carol lived 2 hours away and visited 3 times a year. And then, in the final months, when our mother could barely hold a pen, Carol swept back into her life, moved into the house and produced 3 weeks before the funeral a brand new will that left the house, the savings, everything, to Carol, and cut me out almost entirely. She told the whole family I was the greedy one. She told them I had only cared for our mother to get the inheritance, and that in the end, our mother had seen the truth and changed her will accordingly. It was a masterpiece of exactly backward. But here is the one thing Carol did not know. Our mother, Ruth Doyle, spent 79 years watching her daughter carefully. And she was not a foolish woman. And long before the end, in a clear and lucid month, she had quietly made arrangements of her own with an attorney Carol did not know existed. Carol thought she was the only one making plans. She was not. She was never the only one. Before we get into this, if you are new here, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel more than you know. And while you are here, do me a favor and drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from and what time it is where you are. I read every one of them, and I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to the kind of childhood that shaped both of us, and to the woman who raised us, and to the 3 years that gave me my mother back before they took her away. I grew up in Millhaven, a town of about 8,000 people in the flat farm country, where the grain elevators stand up over everything like church steeples. My father worked for the railroad and died when I was 20, a heart attack in the rail yard, sudden and total. And after that it was our mother who held the whole family together with a schoolteacher's salary and a will of iron. Ruth Doyle taught 4th grade in Millhaven for 34 years. Half the town had been her students. She was small and quiet and completely immovable when she believed she was right, and she raised my sister and me alone after Dad died, and she never once complained about it. Not to us, not to anyone. I tell you that she was immovable when she was right because it matters to how this ends. My mother was the gentlest woman I ever knew, and also the most stubborn, in a quiet way that never raised its voice and never once backed down. When she believed a thing was true and fair, you could argue with her until the cows came home, and she would just look at you with those calm schoolteacher's eyes and wait for you to finish, and then do exactly what she had always intended to do. I saw parents of her students learn this the hard way over the years. I saw the school board learn it. What I did not fully appreciate until the very end was that this same quiet iron was pointed all along at the future, at what she knew her own daughter was capable of, and that my mother, gentle and stubborn, had decided years in advance that she would not be moved on the matter of the truth, not even by death. Carol inherited our mother's sharpness. She did not inherit that iron sense of what was fair. That difference is the whole story. My sister Carol is 4 years older than me, and I want to be fair to her, or as fair as I can be, because a story like this is worthless if the villain is a cartoon. Carol was the bright one, the ambitious one, the one who could not wait to get out of Millhaven and never really came back. She was charming when she wanted to be and sharp as a razor always, and she left for the city at 18 and built a life there, a good one by the look of it, and over the years she became a person who called our mother on Sundays for exactly 15 minutes and came home for Christmas afternoon and left before dinner. I do not think Carol ever hated our mother. I think Carol simply decided somewhere along the way that her real life was elsewhere, and that Mom was an obligation to be managed at a distance. And for a long time that was fine, because I was there, and I did not mind being there. I stayed in Millhaven. I never had Carol's hunger to leave. I took a job as a maintenance supervisor at the regional hospital, married a local woman named Sandra who works in the school office, raised 2 kids who are grown now and doing well. My life was small the way Carol would have called it small, and rich the way I have always known it to be rich. And because I stayed, when our mother began to fail, I was the one who was there. That is not a complaint. I want to be very clear about that because Carol would later twist it into one. Caring for my mother in her last years was not a burden I resented. It was the great privilege of my life. But it was also, and there is no gentle way to say this, 3 years of hard, exhausting, unglamorous labor that my sister did not lift one finger to share. And that fact is going to matter. It started with small forgetfulness, the year our mother turned 76, and then it became more than that, a slow tide going out. There was a diagnosis, and there was a long, cruel decline that anyone who has walked it with a parent will recognize, and that I will not detail here except to say that it asks everything of you. For 3 years I was there almost every day. I set up her medications. I cooked her meals and later fed them to her. I handled her bills and her house and her doctors. I learned to lift her safely when she could no longer stand on her own. On her clear days, and there were still many clear days for a long time, we would sit together and she would tell me stories about my father, about her students, about her own girlhood. And those afternoons are the treasure of my whole life. On her hard nights, I slept in the chair beside her bed so she would not wake up frightened and alone. Carol called on Sundays for 15 minutes and came at Christmas and left before dinner. Let me give you one afternoon, so it is not just a list of duties because the duties are not what I remember. It was a Tuesday in the spring, one of her clear days, and I had her out on the back porch in the good chair with a blanket, and she was watching the birds at the feeder I kept full for her. And out of nowhere she started telling me about the day she met my father, at a dance in the Millhaven Grange Hall in 1962, how he had stepped on her feet 3 times, and she had decided to marry him anyway because he apologized so sincerely. She laughed telling it, the real laugh, the one from before she got sick, and for about 20 minutes my mother was completely herself, and I sat there and held her hand, and did not say much because I did not want to spend a single second of it talking. Those afternoons were not a burden. I need you to understand that. I would trade the house and every dollar of the estate to have one more of them. That is the thing Carol never understood, and the thing she would later try to sell to the whole family as a lie. That I was not there for what our mother had, I was there for our mother. There is an ocean between those two things, and Carol has spent her whole life unable to see it. I never once asked Carol for money, and I never once asked her to change her life. But about 2 years in, tired to the bone, I did ask her on the phone gently if she could come for even a few days so I could take Sandra somewhere for our anniversary. And Carol said she was terribly busy and that maybe we should look into a facility because clearly this was becoming too much for me, and wasn't it a little unfair of Mum to expect so much? That was the first time I understood, really understood, that my sister and I were not in the same story at all. I was living inside our mother's last years. Carol was managing a distant obligation, and I would come to see, quietly counting the days. Now here is something you need to know because it becomes the hinge of everything. Our mother, even deep into her decline, had long stretches of complete lucidity, especially in the mornings and especially in the earlier years of her illness. This is common, and it is one of the cruelest and also, in our case, one of the most important features of what happened. My mother was not a vegetable. She was a sharp, careful, retired schoolteacher who was losing pieces of herself unevenly over years, and who understood exactly what was happening to her, and who spent her clear hours thinking hard about the future, and about her 2 children, and about what she knew, in her bones, was coming. I did not know at the time how much thinking she was doing. I found out later. We all did in that courtroom. The existing will, the real one, the one that had stood for 15 years, was simple and fair and very much my mother. It left the family house and the bulk of her savings to be split evenly between Carol and me, with a specific provision, added a few years into my caregiving, that gave me an additional sum in recognition of the years I had spent as her caregiver, an amount she had discussed openly with both of us, that Carol had, at the time, in front of witnesses, agreed was more than fair. That was the will everyone in the family knew about. That was the will Carol agreed to, right up until the last few months, when Carol decided she wanted all of it. In the final 6 months of our mother's life, when she could no longer really speak much and could not hold a pen without help, and did not always know what day it was, Carol changed. She took a leave from her job. She moved into the house, into our mother's house, and in the name of helping, she began systematically to push me out. She changed the locks, she said, because of a lost key. She began controlling access, telling me Mom was too tired for a visit. The exact way, I would later realize with a chill, that predators always control access. She hired a lawyer I had never heard of from the city, not our family's longtime attorney in Millhaven. And 3 weeks before our mother died, with our mother by then almost entirely nonverbal and heavily medicated, Carol produced a new will. Let me slow down on those final months, because the pattern only shows its true shape when you lay the pieces in order, and at the time each piece came with a reasonable explanation attached, the way these things always do. First, Carol took her leave from work and moved in, and I was, God help me, grateful, because I was exhausted, and I thought my sister had finally come home to help carry it. Then the locks changed, and Carol said she had lost a key and it was just easier this way, and she would get me a copy, and somehow the copy never came. Then my visits started needing to be arranged in advance, because Mum was resting, because Mum had a bad night, because the doctor said too much stimulation was hard on her. And Carol delivered every one of these with such warm concern that to push back felt like I was the one being difficult. Then Carol began handling the mail and the bills and the accounts, all of it, taking the financial reins I had held for 3 years, and when I asked about it, she said she was just trying to take some weight off me. Wasn't that what I wanted? And all the while a lawyer I had never heard of, from the city, was making visits to the house that I only learned about later. Every single brick on its own looked like a sister finally stepping up. Laid in a row after the fact, they were the exact and deliberate construction of a wall between a dying woman and the son who had cared for her, built so that when the time came there would be no one in the room but Carol. I did not see it while it was happening. You never do. That is what makes it work. The new will left the house to Carol. It left the savings to Carol. It left me a few $1,000s and a box of photographs, and it contained language, cold, careful, lawyerly language, stating that our mother wished to recognize the daughter who had sacrificed her career to provide care in the final period, and to correct an earlier will that had been made under a misunderstanding. It was signed with a shaky mark that could have been our mother's hand or could have been anything, witnessed by 2 people I did not know, and notarized by a notary from the city. Carol presented it to the family after the funeral, at the house, standing in our mother's living room, and she framed the whole thing with tears in her eyes as our mother's final wish, our mother finally seeing at the end which child had really loved her. I want to tell you what that did to me, because it was worse than the money, so much worse. Some of the family believed her. That is the thing I was not prepared for. Carol was persuasive, and grief makes people confused. And there I was, the son who had been there every single day for 3 years, suddenly cast as the greedy one, the one who had wormed his way in for the inheritance, the one our mother had supposedly seen through at the very end. An aunt would not look at me at the funeral. A cousin sent me a message I will not repeat. Carol had not just taken the house and the money. She had taken the story. She had taken 3 years of the hardest, most loving work of my life and turned it, in the mouths of people I loved, into a con. And I stood in my mother's living room, the room where I had fed her and read to her and held her hand through her last winter, and I felt something I had never felt before in my life, a rage so total and so clean that it frightened me. I have to be honest with you about how deep that cut went, because the money was never the wound. I could have lived without the house. What I could not live with was standing in that room and watching people I had known my whole life look at me differently. My uncle, my father's brother, a man who taught me to fish, gave me a small, tight nod and would not meet my eyes. A cousin I grew up beside pulled her children a little closer when I passed, as if the greedy brother might rub off on them. Carol had done something I did not know was possible. She had reached 3 years into the past. Into every early morning I got up before dawn to make our mother's breakfast. Into every night I slept folded into that chair, and she had turned all of it, in the minds of the people I loved, into the patient scheming of a man after an inheritance. She had stolen not just the estate but the meaning of the best and hardest thing I ever did. I lay awake that first night, and Sandra lay awake beside me, and neither of us spoke, because there was nothing to say that the rage would not have ruined. In the morning I got up and I made coffee, and I made a decision that I was going to be my mother's son and not my sister's brother. I was going to be quiet, and I was going to be careful, and I was going to let the truth do what the truth does. And this is the moment, the exact moment, where I want you to pay attention, because it is the moment the whole thing turned, and it did not turn the way rage wanted it to. I opened my mouth to scream the truth at that living room full of people, and I did not do it, because I understood, in a flash of the clarity I must have gotten from my mother, that if I screamed I would lose. Carol had the will, Carol had the tears, Carol had the story, and a screaming man is exactly what the story needed to complete itself. If I raged, I became the villain she had cast. So I closed my mouth. I said quietly that I loved our mother and that I would let the process sort out what was fair, and I walked out of that house with my wife's hand in mine, and every person in that room, I could feel it, took my quiet for guilt. Let them, I thought. Let them for now. Because I did not yet have proof, and a man without proof who shouts only digs his own grave. So I went home, and I did what my mother's son does. I got quiet and I got careful and I started to think. The first thing I did, the very next morning, was call our family's long-time attorney in Millhaven, a man named Harold Pike, who had done my parents' legal work for over 30 years, who had drawn up the original fair will, and who Carol had conspicuously gone around when she hired her city lawyer. I did not call Harold to make trouble. I called him because he had known my mother for 3 decades, and I wanted honestly to hear a friendly voice. And when I told Harold what had happened, that Carol had produced a new will from a city lawyer 3 weeks before Mom died, there was a long silence on the phone, and then Harold Pike said something I will remember for the rest of my life. He said, "Gregory, I need you to come into my office. There is something your mother left with me, and she was very specific about when you were to receive it." I drove to Harold's office that afternoon with my heart going like a hammer, and Harold sat me down, and he told me the thing that turned this entire story, the thing Carol never knew and never could have known. Harold is a careful man, and he did not blurt it out. He poured me a coffee I did not drink, and he told me my mother had come to see him 8 months before she passed, driven by her friend Eleanor from the church choir, and that she had been, in Harold's words, sharp as a tack that morning, sharper than she had been in weeks. She had sat in the very chair I was sitting in and laid out calmly exactly what she believed was coming, and asked him to help her prepare for it. And when Harold told me that my mother had recorded a video, I put my face in my hands, because the thought of seeing her clear and whole again after months of watching her fade was almost more than I could stand. Then Harold said the thing that steadied me and turned my grief into resolve. He said, "Gregory, your mother did not do this to win a fight. She did it because she could not bear the thought of you standing accused with no way to defend yourself and her gone. This was the last thing she did as your mother. She protected you from the grave." I have carried that sentence every day since. 8 months before she died, in a clear and lucid stretch, our mother had come to see Harold Pike, on her own, having arranged the visit herself through a friend from her church who drove her, without telling either of her children. And in that meeting, my mother had done 3 things. She had reaffirmed her true will, the fair one, the one that split things evenly, and recognized my caregiving, executing a fresh, properly witnessed copy so there could be no doubt it was current. She had written, in her own careful schoolteacher's hand, a letter to be opened after her death, and because Harold had gently suggested it, knowing what he knew of families, my mother had agreed to record a video. Harold told me my mother had understood exactly what she was doing and exactly why. She had said to him in that meeting words that Harold wrote down at the time and read back to me in his office, words I could hear in her voice as clearly as if she were in the room. She had said, Harold, when I am gone and I cannot defend myself, Carol is going to try to take it all, and she is going to make Gregory out to be the greedy one. Because that is easier for Carol than being grateful. I have watched her my whole life. I love her, but I will not let her rewrite what my son did for me. So let us make sure that when the time comes, I can still speak. My mother had seen the entire thing coming, 8 months out in complete lucidity, and she had quietly built the one weapon that could defeat it. Her own clear voice, preserved from a time when no one could question her mind. I did not go to Carol with this. I want you to understand the discipline of it, because it is the whole lesson. I had in my hands the thing that would destroy her false will completely, and I did not call her, and I did not confront her, and I did not so much as hint at it. Because Harold explained to me that the right place for this was not a family living room where Carol could spin it, but a probate court, under oath, on the record, in front of a judge, where a spun story goes to die. If I tipped Carol off, she and her city lawyer would have months to concoct explanations, to challenge the recording, to muddy the water. But if it arrived cold, in court, in my mother's own voice, from a lucid moment 8 months before any of Carol's manipulations, there would be nothing to spin. So I did the hardest thing of all. I let Carol keep believing she had won. For weeks, while Harold and I quietly assembled everything, I endured the family's cold shoulders and Carol's pitying, victorious little messages, and I said nothing, and I waited. I will not pretend the waiting was easy, because it was the hardest thing I have ever done, harder than the 3 years of caregiving in its own way. Every day I carried in my chest the knowledge that I held the thing that would clear my name and destroy Carol's lie completely. And every day I had to watch people I loved go on believing the worst of me and say nothing and let them. There was a family dinner in those weeks, a cousin's birthday, and I went because staying home would have looked like guilt, and I sat at a table where half the room thought I was a thief, and Carol sat across from me playing the wounded, gracious sister who was rising above her greedy brother. And I ate my meal and I complimented the cake, and I did not say the words that were burning a hole in me. Sandra squeezed my knee under the table once, hard, when I went quiet, and I understood it as her telling me to hold. I held, because Harold had taught me the one thing that made it bearable, that a truth revealed too early in the wrong room can be argued with, but a truth revealed at the right moment, under oath, on the record, cannot. I was not staying silent out of weakness. I was loading the truth into the one place where Carol's talent for spin would be worth exactly nothing. And so I waited, and I let her think she had won, right up until the morning my mother started speaking. And while I waited, I did the unglamorous work that turns a strong case into an unbeatable one, the work my mother's whole careful life had trained me to respect. I did not need to prove I was a good son. My mother's video did that, but Harold and I built the fortress around it anyway. We obtained our mother's medical records from the relevant period, which showed in clinical black and white exactly how impaired she was and how heavily medicated in the weeks when Carol's will was signed, when our mother supposedly made a lucid, considered decision to disinherit the son who cared for her. We documented the timeline. The fact that Carol's will appeared only after she had moved in and changed the locks and controlled all access. We noted that Carol had bypassed the family's longtime attorney for a city lawyer who had never met our mother before. And we set it all beside the thing at the center, the video made 8 months earlier, when the medical records themselves proved our mother was lucid and capable. Carol's will rested on a shaky mark from a medicated, nonverbal woman. My mother's true wishes rested on her own clear face and voice, and a fresh, executed will, and a handwritten letter, all from a documented moment of full capacity. It was not close. Carol just did not know yet that it was not close. The petition went in. Carol, as executor of her false will, was of course notified, and I am told her city lawyer was confident and even a little contemptuous at first, treating me as the bitter, cut-out brother making a nuisance. Carol herself sent me one final message before the hearing, and I have kept it because it tells you everything about who she was. She wrote that she was sorry it had come to this, that she understood I was hurt, but that Mom had made her wishes clear at the end, and that I should accept them with grace. Even then, even to the last. She was still telling me, in that soft, superior voice, what our mother had wanted. I did not reply. In a few days, our mother was going to tell her. That is the hearing I began this story with. A small probate courtroom in the county seat, my sister beside me, composed and certain in an expensive coat. Her lawyer presented the new will and its cold language about the sacrificing daughter and the misunderstanding. And then it was our turn, and Harold Pike, who had known my mother for 30 years, rose and told the court that the decedent had, of her own initiative, and in a documented period of full mental capacity, left evidence of her true and considered wishes, and he asked to enter it into the record. He entered the fresh, properly executed true will. He entered the medical records establishing our mother's incapacity at the time Carol's will was signed. He entered the handwritten letter. And then the bailiff wheeled that small television to the front of the room, and Harold pressed play. And my mother, Ruth Doyle, 34 years a schoolteacher, appeared on the screen, clear-eyed and composed, sitting in Harold's office 8 months before her death. And she began to speak. I will not give you every word she said because some of it belongs only to me. But I will tell you that she looked into that camera and she stated her name and the date and that she was of sound mind, which the medical records confirmed. She stated plainly what her true will contained and why, the even split and the recognition of my years of care that Carol had once agreed was fair. And then she looked into the camera, and her voice did not shake, and she said that she was making this recording because she knew her daughter, and she knew that after she was gone, Carol would try to claim it all and would try to paint Gregory as greedy, and that she, their mother, would not permit her death to be used to rewrite the truth of what her son had done for her. She said, Gregory was there, every day. Carol was not. I say this not in anger, but as a simple fact that I want remembered. And then she said one more thing, looking right out of that screen, and the whole courtroom was silent, and I could not breathe. She said, Carol, if you are watching this, it means you did the thing I prayed you would not do. I forgive you, but you will not have it this way. I raised you better, and I am still your mother, even now. The courtroom did not make a sound. I have been in quiet rooms before, but I have never felt a silence with weight like that one. The weight of an entire family hearing a dead woman tell them, gently and without a shred of doubt, exactly what had happened. On the screen, my mother folded her hands the way she used to at the kitchen table before she said grace, and she waited a moment, and even the judge, a man who has surely seen every kind of family war there is, sat very still. I looked at Carol's lawyer, and he was no longer contemptuous. He was reading and rereading a page in front of him that was not going to help him, because there is no motion, no objection, no clever cross-examination that touches a mother's clear face, speaking from a documented moment of full capacity. 8 months before any of it happened. He knew it. I watched him know it. And I looked at Carol, and my sister was not composed anymore. Her certain expensive calm had cracked right down the middle, and underneath it was a frightened woman, watching the one person she could never manipulate, our mother, reach up out of the grave, and quietly, lovingly, take everything back. I have never seen a room so quiet. I turned and looked at my sister, and Carol was staring at that screen with her mouth slightly open and every drop of color gone from her face, because there is no lawyer in the world, no argument, no spin, that can survive your dead mother looking you in the eye from a moment of documented lucidity and telling the court exactly what you were going to do before you did it. The judge did not need long. Carol's will was thrown out entirely, found to be the product of undue influence exercised over a woman without the capacity to make it, which is exactly what it was. My mother's true will was admitted and honored, and the estate was settled precisely as our mother, in her right mind and her whole heart, had wished it to be settled, the even split, and the recognition of the son who stayed. But I want to tell you the part that mattered more than the house and the money, because by the end I found I barely cared about those. The family heard it. Every aunt and cousin who had believed Carol's story, who had looked away from me at the funeral, who had thought me the greedy one, sat in that courtroom and heard our mother, in her own voice, tell the truth. The story Carol stole from me, my mother took back and handed to me again, from beyond the grave, in front of everyone whose opinion had wounded me. My aunt, who would not look at me at the funeral, came to me in the parking lot afterward, weeping, and took my hands, and could not even get the apology out. And I told her she did not need to because grief makes fools of all of us, and Carol is very good at what she does. I meant it. I was not interested in punishing the people Carol had fooled. I only ever wanted the truth in the room, and now it was. I want to stay in that parking lot with you for a moment, because it is the part I did not expect, and the part that healed me. It was not just my aunt. One by one, in the weeks that followed, the family came back to me quietly, in kitchens and over phone calls, not with grand apologies, but with small gestures, an invitation to dinner, a hand on the shoulder, my uncle asking if I wanted to go fishing that Saturday the way we used to. Nobody made a speech. That is not how families like mine work. But the story had been set right, and everybody knew it, and slowly the coldness thawed, and I got my family back along with my name. And I realized somewhere in there that this was the thing Carol had truly stolen, and the thing my mother had truly returned. Not the house, not the money, my place in the family. Carol had made me a stranger in my own blood, and my mother, in 8 foreseeing months of quiet planning, had made me a son and a brother and a nephew again. There is no dollar figure on that. There never was. I think about my mother's foresight all the time now, the sheer clear-eyed courage of it. Picture it. A woman losing pieces of herself to a cruel illness, who could have spent her few good hours resting or reminiscing or simply being at peace, chose instead to spend one of those precious clear mornings arranging her own defense of a son she would not be alive to protect. She looked her own death in the face and passed it to a courtroom she would never sit in, and she made sure that when that day came she would not be silent. I do not know if I have that kind of courage. I hope I never have to find out the way she did. But I know that everything good in me, the staying, the patience, the refusal to become the shouting man Carol needed me to be, all of it came from her, and she proved it one last time, on a television screen, in a county courtroom, 8 months after she thought to. As for Carol, I will tell you where it stands because I know you want to know, and because the ending is not what Rage would have written and is better for it. Carol got nothing beyond her fair half under the true will, which is more than she deserved, and exactly what our mother, in her mercy, chose to give her, because the true will split things evenly, and our mother, even seeing everything, would not disinherit her own daughter. Think about that. My mother knew exactly what Carol would do, and she still left her half of everything, because that is who our mother was, and it shames me a little that I would not have been so generous. Carol and I do not speak now. I have not slammed that door forever because our mother would not have wanted me to, and because I have her example in front of me, that impossible generosity, and I am trying slowly to be worthy of it. But we do not speak now, and that is Carol's doing, not mine. She could not look me in the eye after that courtroom, and she has not tried since. I have the house. Sandra and I have talked about selling it, and we may, but not yet, because I am not done sitting in the rooms where my mother told me stories about my father on her clear afternoons. Some evenings I go over there alone and just sit on the back porch by the bird feeder. I still keep full in the good chair where she used to sit with her blanket, and I let the quiet be what it is. The house does not feel like an inheritance to me. It feels like the last room my mother is still in a little, and I am not ready to lock the door on that yet. And I have the video, the whole video, a copy Harold gave me, and I will keep it until I die, though I have only watched it through once more alone late one night, not for the part that defeated Carol, for the last 30 seconds, which were not for the court at all, which were my mother, looking into the camera, saying goodbye to me, her son, and thanking me by name for staying. That is what I got, in the end, out of all of it. My mother's voice, telling me I did right. There is no inheritance on this earth worth more than that. So let me leave you with the thing my mother taught me one last time, from beyond the grave, and then I will let you go. The people who would rob you of what matters most, even the ones who share your blood, they count on 2 things. They count on your grief to confuse you, and they count on your rage to discredit you. My sister had a plan for a shouting, bitter brother. She had no plan at all for a quiet one, who simply waited for the truth to arrive on its own schedule. in its proper place, under oath. Do not give the people who wrong you the loud, wild version of yourself that their story needs. Get quiet. Get careful. Trust that the truth, if you protect it and place it where it cannot be spun, does not need you to scream on its behalf. My mother knew that. She spent her clear hours making sure that when she could no longer defend herself, she could still somehow speak. And she did. Oh, she did. If this story meant something to you, tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. And tell me honestly, has your own family ever fought over something after a loss? And did the truth win in the end? Or is it still winning slowly? I read every single comment, and I want to hear it. Take care of yourselves, take care of the parents who raised you while you still have them, and I will see you in the next one.